Text, change in perspective. Emily Kitchen, friend of the FDR Memorial.
Enter Jim Dixon, an activist with a disability who was also a bit of a celebrity. Mike and Alan hired him to help the cause.
Nyla Morton.
In response to the outrage, the committee said, "You have to be blind to go through the memorial and not know Roosevelt was disabled." This only intensified disability activists' outrage, some of whom, like Jim, were blind. It became their mission to uphold Roosevelt's legacy, accurately depicting him as he lived, with a disability.
FDR in a wheelchair.
This wasn't Jim's first rodeo. He single-handedly sailed to Bermuda to display what disabled people can do. He and fellow activists once carried a coffin into the DC Metro headquarters to protest the lack of safety for blind people in the DC public transportation system.
Protest signs.
He helped escalate the fight. Around this time, Christopher Reeve, an actor who played Superman, had a horseback riding accident and became a wheelchair user.
Reeve in his wheelchair.
Because he was a huge star, it wasn't surprising he met with the Clintons. He let them know he thought it was important that FDR should be shown with a disability in the memorial.
Thank you very much for taking the time to see us. Really appreciate it.
In May 1996, President Clinton gave a speech and said,
"Just last week, I had a very moving visit with Christopher Reeve in the Oval Office, and I mentioned to Christopher that in 1933, the Oval Office was the first government office designed specifically to be accessible, to accommodate President Roosevelt. He said to me that it was too bad that at the time, he had to hide his disability. I hope with Christopher Reeve that as the Roosevelt Memorial becomes a reality, with your efforts to remove the stigma of disability, they'll find a way to make sure that the American people know that this great, great president was great with his disability."
A typewritten letter.
16 of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt's grandchildren also issued a letter saying they believed their grandfather would want to be shown with a disability in his memorial. Meanwhile, Jim, Alan, and Mike mobilized 50 disability organizations, independent advocates, journalists, politicians, and former presidents. Social activism confronted power structures. From street protests to bake sale fundraising, momentum was building. In reference to FDR's disability, Eleanor once said, "It gave him strength and courage he had not had before. He had to think out the fundamentals of living and learn the greatest of all lessons: infinite patience and never-ending persistence." This same relentless patience and persistence fueled people living with disabilities' fight for representation and justice.
The Park Service logo.
During one of Jim's meetings with the National Park Service, someone slipped him a piece of paper. When he got back to his office, his assistant read it to him. It said to call a phone number. A voice on the other line told him about an upcoming reception in upstate New York where artwork for the memorial was going to be revealed.
Memorial protested.
Jim got in touch with disability leaders in the area, and they staged a protest, interrupting the event. An unexpected, disruptive scene, the protest sent a powerful message. It was April 15th, and the memorial was going to be dedicated on May 2nd. The disability community across the country was activated. But time was running out. With only days left before the dedication, President Clinton invited Jim and other activists to the White House and told them he was going to call for legislation to add a depiction of FDR in his wheelchair.
The legislation passed in the Senate a day before the memorial's opening, passing smoothly in the House of Representatives. It became official. A new statue would be added. Protests quickly turned into a celebration and victory for people living with disabilities.
But first, in 1997, the original statue of FDR was unveiled as a part of an elaborate, star-studded memorial dedication in DC's Tidal Basin. President Clinton led the dedication.
"Today we honor the greatest president of this great American century."
The original statue showed Roosevelt cloaked head to toe, sitting in what looks like a regular chair. But a new statue would be added. It just needed to be funded, to the tune of $1.65 million. Donations came in from people across the country, disabled and able-bodied alike.
FDR wheelchair statue.
On January 10, 2001, a new statue of FDR was unveiled and dedicated by President Clinton in the memorial. FDR wheelchair is visible, marking the end of a 6-year fight by disability advocacy groups to memorialize the president as he lived, showcasing his disability as a point of pride.
Mike DeLand.
School children who will visit this memorial will know that FDR led this nation and the world from his wheelchair. They will know that in America, anything is possible.
Designed by sculptor Robert Graham, the life-size statue sits on the ground, not on a pedestal, removed from the walls so people can gather and move around it with full accessibility.
Children surround the statue.
Instead of a giant figure looming from above, the 3 million people who visit annually can now get a sense of Roosevelt's perspective, seeing the world from where he sat.
The fight for representation, healthcare, and accessibility for people living with disability is far from over. But tireless advocates continue to make progress, including the FDR Memorial correction. While plenty of monuments can't stand the test of time, this memorial adapted. 2 statues in one space capture the duality of how FDR lived. Finally, it's a place where anyone with a disability can see themselves.
Braille signage.
An empowering reminder of what's possible and hopefully what's to come.
In memory of the disabled advocates and allies who fought for disability rights and representation, video produced by the FDR Memorial Legacy Committee. This project has been funded by National Trust for Historic Preservation's Telling the Full History Preservation Fund, with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Gordon and Laura Gund Foundation. Special thanks to all the donors who made the FDR wheelchair statue a reality, especially Judy and Peter Blum Kovler Foundation, the Gordon and Laura Gund Foundation. Thank you to our narrators, Nyla Morton and Emily Kitchen. A smiling Nyla uses a wheelchair. Executive producer Ben Patterson, Onslaught Films. Nyla makes the V sign with 2 fingers.